The work's called Here We Are, and it's a new video installation across 3 channels that's looking at a kind of relationships between humans and birds in the city, and in particular the Indian myna bird, which is a bird that I've been looking at and thinking about for a few years now. The Indian myna bird was introduced to Australia in 1862 to Melbourne to control insects in market gardens. It came to Australia via India, which is part of its sort of natural distribution range, and so in a way it also talks about a kind of colonial system and follows the kind of Commonwealth route through various colonies to Australia, and then from Australia it was actually distributed to the Pacific Islands for the same reason. Like a lot of animals that have been introduced into other environments, it's had a devastating effect on the natural wildlife, and is because it's aggressive and it pushes out other birds. But the kind of focus of this work, in terms of calling it Here We Are, is that they're the things that appear in the work are these birds and humans and rubbish and the city space and trees, but everything is built in the computer through video fragments. So I filmed trees, I filmed pavement, I filmed different buildings, I filmed paper bird models in a special green room where I could take everything out. I filmed a colleague sweeping the floor, the street, like in the green room again. So all the parts are disconnected and the whole is created in the computer and in the editing process. So nothing fits together. Everything, we don't fit together, the trees don't fit together, the pavement doesn't fit together. One of the channels is of a shot of just the sky with the Indian myna birds sort of flying through, but also a couple of plastic bags kind of blowing kind of continuously in that space. So there's sort of rubbish as a kind of theme, and sometimes those birds are actually called rubbish birds because they live off rubbish and they live off human waste. And that also nicely connects to a term in bird watching which is called junk birds, which is birds which are really common and are easy to tick off on your list. So there's a kind of conversation there about waste and rubbish and things that sort of are not fitting. And that actually connects to some of the other themes in the show. In terms of the Bubba International work, they have made these kind of corridors which are filled with rubbish as a way of people negotiating the space. So my work kind of connects with that, and that there's a channel, one of the video screens is placed near one of their corridors, and into that screen rubbish appears as if it's kind of appearing from their space, but it's obviously appearing on the screen and behaving in another way once it gets into my work. Well, I guess I've been making work about birds and human relationships with birds for about 5 years, and sometimes also specifically the Indian myna. And I guess I'm interested in that as an idea because it's a way of not offering an easy interpretation of a work. In the past I've made work which was really connected to conservation and conservation issues, and it was sort of easy to see where I was standing or which side I was on, and I was interested after making those works to make a work which was more, where I was standing was more ambiguous. And in relation to the work I've just made, Here We Are, that kind of, even the title is suggesting that there's a kind of interconnectedness, and am I speaking from the position of the human, or am I speaking from the position of the animal? And I was the first person I showed the work to when they just happened to be at my place, and we were looking at what I was working on the computer, and he said he found it confusing, like whether or not I was talking about rubbish negatively in terms of the way we destroy an environment, or whether I was talking, you know, from the position of the bird, that it was upset in terms of the rubbish, or it was a human position in relation to that rubbish. So it was somehow, for him, there was something in the work which was kind of open-ended in that way, and that's what I've sort of been seeking, and a little bit in relation to just moving on from works where my position has been a lot clearer, so that for myself also, that it's not clear, it's not 100% certain when I start making the work how all of those disparate parts are going to come together. I'm also interested in working with birds because they're around us all the time. In fact, we sort of forget that they're there a lot of the time, and it's only when you sort of start to really take notice of that kind of detail that that other sort of stories you're able to open up and talk about in a more kind of macro level, so that, you know, this bird is here, the bird's there, but there are other things in relation to that bird which are there. So that's what I've been looking at as a theme for a while, for about 5 years in my work. And so here we are is the latest kind of iteration of that, and like some other recent works, it uses video and kind of animation techniques, mixing between analog animation techniques and digital animation techniques to kind of create a unified piece. I think Aaron was interested in presenting a view of Sydney which is kind of describing its diversity and its migratory kind of paths that make up the city. And so in a way my work fits in terms of that it literally presents the city, or a view of a city, a kind of Australian city made up of sort of different parts of different places, but also that it has a kind of, not only are there human migratory paths, but animal migratory paths. And so that work, that bird in particular takes up that kind of thread. So I think that is one way it fits, but as I've mentioned, there's that second layer of the kind of rubbish and chaos, which Aaron's interested in relation to cities. And so the discontinuous space of the video allows a kind of reflection on the city as a thing that's made up of parts, and the rubbish as a kind of motif or theme that's running through that space, connects literally with the Bubba International work, but I also think with some of the other works as well.